Yeshi Choedon. She was with JNU and now she's retired, and she gave a beautiful lecture on India's approach to reconstruction of Tibetan society in exile. Ma'am, I would like to know the modern scenario at this point of time, because we are talking about 1950s, where India was unable to support the Chinese aggression in Tibet, and also raise concerns about that in the United Nations, which you talked about in your lecture. But now the approach is slightly changing, and with India moving towards the east, and also with Japan's support, India is trying to develop other countries to raise awareness about the Tibetan issues. And one of the major messages from His Holiness is to um, understand the fraternity and the brotherhood, and also to promote peace in the entire region, which is very important for India, because from a scriptural point of view, most of the after Nalanda was destroyed, the Sanskrit texts were translated in the Tibetan language in terms of wisdom also. So how do you see this modern, scenario shaping up towards the future?
In a sense that India changes policy
Yes.
specifically about Tibet at the United Nations,
Yes.
not recently, but 1965,
Yes.
after 1962 war with China.
Yeah.
So before 62 war, India was taking a hands-off policy because
Yes.
they wanted to have a good relation with China.
Yes.
But after 1962 wars, the next
The loss in
major-
the war actually initiated that.
War with China in 1962
Yeah.
is a turning point, because in 1965, when the issue of Tibet was raised in UN General Assembly in 1965, India supported the first time the resolution on Tibet. So it is not that it's the present time India had changed. India
65
changed.
onwards.
Yeah, 62 onwards,
62
you can
onwards,
say,
yeah.
after India faced a major
Yes.
crisis with the China.
Yeah.
So in a sense that then, India tried to adapt itself to the changing scenario and tried to continue to have a good relation with China, and that's why politically India was not backing up the Tibet to great extent. But in terms of reconstruction, preservation, protection of Tibetan race and civilization, it has been going on since 1960s up till the present time.
Right.
So in a sense that because of change in international politics, India finds and also the deterioration of relation with China especially in the case of border crisis, India had no option but to protect, take up Tibetan issues.
Yes.
And publicize atrocities committed in Tibet. So that's beneficial to the Indian national policy, Indian foreign policy.
Yes.
Okay.
And about the international scenario, if I just ask, we were talking about the Indian support as well, but from United States also, there are also raising of awareness about the Tibetan freedom movement.
Yeah.
Richard Gere has been doing a lot of work in the United States as well.
Yeah.
So how do you see this entire scenario panning out in the coming years? Because China now is a major superpower, and from the United States, policies sometimes can be not very clear, right? And India's stance is, as you said, 62, 65 onwards have started improving, right? Changing, hopefully for the better. So how do you think that, because I think Venerable Zamdung Rinpoche would be coming today to grace the occasion, and he said that it's always not only a political struggle or against an establishment or a system, but it is all about creating a new generation where heritage can be restored, language can be restored, and also the goodwill as well as autonomy at the same point of time.
But in case of change of policy, change of actual policy from the United States is much earlier than the change in policy of India. In the thing.
Yes.
Because United States, during the Carter regime,
Yeah,
Jimmy Carter's regime, although human rights was a major factor in their foreign policy, they have not raised the Tibet issue.
Yes.
But only in later on, especially George Bush period onwards, that they've been very forthrightly fighting for the Tibetan
So it's in the
causes.
1990s, during the 1990s?
Yeah,
Yes.
so in a sense that they've been very much forthright in terms of supporting Tibet causes, and they established a separate office, a coordination of Tibet in the White
Yes.
House in the
Yes.
United Nations.
Yes.
So in a sense that it was very much a policy of the United States to support Tibet cause, not because of the Tibetans, but
Yes.
because of their problem with
Problem
China.
with China.
Yeah. Similarly, in case of in India, now they're coming forth because of they have a problem with China.
Yes.
But then, unlike others, India has been supporting Tibetan preservation of Tibetan race and culture since 1960s onwards.
Yes.
So but they're not pronouncing to the rest of the world, but they've been doing it. So that kind of reconstruction is much more substantial because Tibetan race and civilization is becoming global now, mainly because of the India's approach for reconstruction of Tibetan society from 1960s onwards.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think, is there any other message you want to give to the global audience about this entire awareness, this workshop, and also in general, to raise awareness about the Tibetan? Is there any message you want to give to everyone?
And the message to everyone is that Tibet race is very much alive, Tibetan identity is very much alive,
Yes.
civilization is very much alive, not in Tibet, but the rest of the
Rest of
world,
the world.
especially in India.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
that is a major contribution India has made for the Tibetan cause.
Yeah.